And so when we look at, let's say, all of that background of the current situations and some of the challenges that are facing these control systems, we also have to think about what forces are influencing how they adopt and how they try to implement cybersecurity. And so we'll talk about four of those main drivers or those main forces that play a role in cybersecurity implementation. So the first is national standards and regulations. And so this is, specific government requirements in different regions, different countries, and it's also something that can vary quite a bit depending on the region. For example, in the UK, the Health and Safety Executive is driving cybersecurity implementation for critical infrastructure, pretty hard for sites with coma scenarios or that could result in loss of essential services. They are conducting audits and helping build remediation plans as we speak, really driving companies to follow OG86 as an example, making sure that they've done cybersecurity risk assessment and having the potential for fines or regulatory action if those steps aren't being taken in an acceptable time frame. And it's certainly not just the UK. For the European Union, the NIS2 directive has been recently updated, and so that's having a major impact on how cybersecurity is being implemented. In Australia, the Security of Critical Infrastructure, or SOCI Act, is having a major impact on critical infrastructure targets there. In the US, we've got some industry-specific regulations looking at the TSA security directives that have come out in recent years. And so we can see that for each country, there are different standards and regulations that really have to be looked at and understood that may play a role on how that company chooses to implement cybersecurity. Next, we can look at the potential insurance requirements. And this is something that we're seeing particularly in the United States. But cybersecurity insurance has become really an increasingly hot topic, both in terms of organizations looking to get coverage, as well as working on understanding what it is that has to be in place in order for an organization to get a policy and what the insurers are actually coming in and auditing for or looking for to make that determination of whether or not a company can be given a policy, because they're trying to understand their risk. And so if they give a policy that covers for a ransomware attack, for example, and the site is not well protected and their chances of experiencing a ransomware attack are pretty high each year, that's going to be a bad return for the insurance company. So they actually have very specific questions, very specific things that they're looking for when making that decision to offer a policy or not. And we've even seen some instances where the insurer may ask a company to fill out a survey or provide information about their current protections. And if the person filling that out really isn't familiar with what the questions are asking, doesn't know how well those controls are being implemented for their site, it's actually possible that the policy may be voided if, for example, you claim that you have effective cybersecurity monitoring, if that monitoring doesn't apply to, let's say, different parts of the system, and you have a significant incident that wasn't caught because it wasn't implemented fully or wasn't implemented for that area. So that's something that companies, as they answer that question of what sort of cyber security insurance do they want or need to be aware of, and that can have a major role in impacting how they adopt cybersecurity. The next one that we can look at are our industry standards or our international guidelines that provide some recommendations and best practices on how to implement cybersecurity. And so here, the IEC 62443 standard is really what we're seeing being broadly adopted in many different regions and many different industries. And this gives that defensible set of best practices that identifies requirements for different stakeholders in the industrial cybersecurity space, and also can be used to really build out a full cybersecurity lifecycle. So we're seeing that have a major impact on how companies are implementing cybersecurity. Certainly, that's not the only standard that's being looked at. There are a number of other best practices, such as the NIST Cybersecurity Framework or NIST 882, that are also playing a role in shaping this. But really, for industrial systems, we're seeing IEC 62443 really be that gold standard. In addition to the cybersecurity standards, It's also important to realize that cybersecurity is being highlighted in safety standards as well. So the 2016 release of the IEC 61511 standard included specific requirements around doing cybersecurity risk assessments for the SIS and connected systems. So if a manufacturer is providing either a configurable component that's going to be used in a 61511 safety system, or people who are providing a, let's say, certified system or a certified site that includes a number of safety functions, there are now specific requirements to doing a cybersecurity risk assessment as part of that. And we're also seeing other industries follow suit. So it's not just the process safety industry, but newer updates to machine safety standards, as well as updates to the machinery directive, also now include some cybersecurity considerations as well. And so that's going to have a major impact on those, the machine industry, as well as other associated industries. And then lastly, when we look at the stakeholder expectations, this is something where it's not just external drivers that are really shaping how companies look at this, but also the individuals within that organization. Even a question as simple as who really has ownership of a cybersecurity risk can lead to some very interesting conversations. Is that the ultimate responsibility of a chief information officer or a chief information security officer or CISO? Or is it something that's really owned by the plant manager or the engineering manager? And as you look at all of the different roles who are involved in cybersecurity, it's important to understand what your specific responsibilities might be, or what role your organization is expecting you to take there. And this is particularly important when we think about the potential for significant downtime or safety impact from an attack on industrial control systems. But if you're a process safety engineer who's counting on an SIS to work and that SIS is compromised, what sort of responsibility do you have to have asked those questions and make sure that that system is designed properly? If it's your control system that you're responsible for, what are you doing to really make sure that that risk is managed? And so that's something that has to be thought about from the individual stakeholders as well, because all of those will drive the way in which companies look at and approach their facility risk management.